The Xbox One X is finally here, and there are already a number of high-profile titles on the console that have received patches that greatly improve their visuals, allowing the new games to play in true 4K on the console. We now know that there are over 130 enhanced games confirmed for the new console, but not all of them are created equal. Though the Xbox One X is capable of 4K or HDR at 60 frames per second along with Dolby Atmos sound, not all games are guaranteed to have all of these improvements. Some will support all of them, while some will support HDR and nothing more. Welcome back to QatNip, and here we have crafted a list of the best games that push the console to its limits. Here you will find the games whose patch details confirm they'll push at least 2 of the console's capabilities, whether that's 4K, HDR or Dolby Atmos. So come on, let's learn together. 10th, Minecraft, which supports 4K, HDR and constant 60 FPS. What is it? Well, Minecraft is a game that needs no introduction, and its super duper graphics pack is set to make its polygonal world the sharpest it's ever looked. While the game keeps its famous blocky appearance, it does receive vastly improved lighting thanks to the inclusion of HDR support. For instance, your creations can now be viewed with the added bonus of a glorious sunset. Colors also received a boost, looking less flat in the process, and vegetation also looks more detailed than ever before. Still, you can rest assured that the Xbox One X version of the game doesn't mess with the winning formula too. It simply makes it better. 9th, Madden NFL 18, which supports 4K and HDR. The Xbox One X patch for Madden NFL 18 is not available just yet, but we already know what to expect. Like the PS4 Pro version, this year's Madden will display at a 4K resolution backed by HDR's expanded color gamut. This will give the game razor-sharp visuals with naturalistic lighting and eye-popping colors, particularly in uniforms and stadiums. On top of the 4K and HDR boost, Madden NFL 18 is expected to always run at a smooth 60 FPS during plays on the field. The PS4 Pro version does this, though will drop to around 30 frames per second during replays and when sideline camera angles are used throughout the game's broadcast-style presentation. Whether the Xbox One X will be able to stick to 60 frames per second at all times is currently unknown. 8th, Halo 5 Guardians, which supports 4K HDR and 60 FPS. Bungie might have left the Halo series to focus on Destiny, but the blockbuster Xbox series is still alive and well thanks to developer 343 Industries. The most recent entry, Halo 5 Guardians, was released back in 2015, but it will be receiving the Xbox One X treatment via a patch that's available right now. When patched for Xbox One X, the game will continue to run at 60 FPS as it did originally, but with the added bonus of a 4K resolution boost. Unfortunately, due to the age of the original release, the game won't be receiving an HDR upgrade alongside its 4K one. Still, a native 2160p resolution and rock-solid 60 frames per second is nothing to be sneezed at. Expect this already beautiful game to look even more stunning when played on the Xbox One X. 7th, FIFA 2018, which supports 4K and HDR. FIFA 18 is another big title that takes advantage of the Xbox One X's 4K and HDR capabilities. Looking more realistic than ever before, the latest entry in the FIFA series displays at 4K on Xbox One X at smooth 60 frames per second, and with HDR support thrown in for good measure. 4K resolution means even more detail and improved textures. You'll pore over every blade of grass, but when it comes to the fast-paced games like FIFA, it's the consistent frame rate we are looking forward to. A slight judder or dip in frame rate could be the difference between making and missing a goal. Add to this the expanded color gamut and improved lighting that HDR brings with it, and this beautiful game really comes to life, contrasting the bright sunlight against the shadows cast by the stadium to add greater depth. 6th, Middle-earth Shadow of War, which supports 4K and HDR. Continuing the trend of giving users the option to how to use the X's extra graphical horsepower, Shadow of War features 2 different graphical settings. You can either have the game favor resolution or favor quality. Choose to favor resolution and the game will attempt to get as close to 4K as possible, falling back on dynamic scaling when this isn't possible. Opt to favor quality and the improvements will be wider ranging, but won't bring the same benefits to the resolution. Textures will see enhanced details, draw distances will be improved, there will be more vegetation and shadows, and lighting will be improved. Both modes will feature HDR and will unfortunately only run at 30 FPS rather than 60. Fifth, Rise of the Tomb Raider, which supports 4K HDR and 60 FPS. The final version of the enhancement patch will support 3 modes, so you can tailor what exactly you want the console to prioritize with the game. High frame rate has the game run at 1080p with enhanced textures and upscaling to reach 4K. This mode is probably the worst looking of the 3, but comes closest to maintaining a locked 60 FPS frame rate. Native 4K mode, as the name suggests, prioritizes rendering a full 4K's worth of pixels, even if this involves bigger hits to frame rate, which can make the game judder in its more intense scenes, even though the game is targeting a more modest 30 FPS. However, since the version that's been played so far isn't final, these performance problems may not be present in the final version of the patch at all. Finally, the enriched 4K mode strikes a nice balance between the two. It features a more advanced form of upscaling, so even though it's not native 4K, it's close enough that it still looks decent. In all 3 modes, the implementation of HDR was a treat. Light peeking into each tomb had a fantastic brightness to it, while water had a fantastic level of glimmer and shine. Fourth, Assassin's Creed Origins, which supports 4K and HDR. As you would probably expect, Assassin's Creed Origins uses the power of the Xbox One X to make some serious visual impact. The game renders at 4K, although those without 4K screens will still benefit from an oversampled 1080p resolution and supports HDR too. The high resolution support means the game's environments and characters are seriously detailed with highly realistic textures, and the console's CPU power means the quality is maintained from longer distances. However, it's HDR that makes the game really shine, creating greater contrast between bright sunlight and flames and shadows. This adds real depth to the game world, capturing the blinding brightness of the Egyptian sun and making the shade of tombs feel mercifully cool. Assassin's Creed Origins has an HDR slider that allows you to manually adjust the game's paper-white balance level as well as the television's brightness nits. Third, Forza Motorsport 7, which supports 4K HDR and 60 FPS. It's the game that's received the most attention in terms of performance assessments. As a first-party title, the game's development team has been able to take full advantage of the Xbox One X's power. The game's patch promises 4K resolution at 60 frames per second with HDR support. Thanks to HDR, the sunlight hitting the track and the vehicles looked brighter than ever. The 4K resolution also allows developer Turn 10 Studios to recreate the cars and their interiors to an astonishing degree of detail. The combination of 4K HDR and locked 60 frames per second brings with it some incredibly detailed and realistic visuals with crisp and responsive gameplay. Second, Call of Duty World War II, which supports 4K and HDR. Right from its opening chapter, which takes place during the D-Day invasion of Normandy, Call of Duty World War II astonishes with its graphical presentation. We have all come to expect the Call of Duty series to provide 60 frames per second gameplay, regardless of the platform, but when that frame rate is used in conjunction with the Xbox One X's 4K resolution boost and HDR functionality, the game takes on an extraordinary level of detail and visual clarity. The opening mission, which recreates the D-Day invasion of Normandy, feels more realistic because of the Xbox One X. Witness, for instance, the realistic textures of fabric on uniforms and realistic skin textures found on faces. Or how about the way the ocean sprays fine mist and water all over you as your landing craft crashes through the waves on your approach to the beach. The game's steady frame rate, incredibly high resolution and high dynamic range colors and lighting gives the game an almost unnerving quality when played on Xbox One X. Like many other Xbox One X enhanced games, Call of Duty World War II has HDR sliders that will allow you to tweak the game's brightness and white balance to your liking. Quite frankly, we want all games on the console to look this good. And finally, first, we have Gears of War 4 that supports 4K HDR, Dolby Atmos and 60 FPS. The fourth entry in the Gears of War series already looked great on the original Xbox One. However, it looks damn near astonishing when enhanced for the Xbox One X. Once patched, new advanced video options appear in the game's settings which give the player control over every major area of its presentation. You can choose whether you want to place preference on detail, that is offering native 4K resolution and textures at 30 frames per second, or performance, that is locked 60 frames per second and increased graphical details. While the jump in details is noticeable when playing the game at 4K, the performance mode looks nearly as good in terms of textures, with the added bonus of running at a buttery smooth frame rate. And while the Xbox One S already provided Gears of War 4 with HDR settings, they have received a boost here to work in conjunction with the game's 4K rendering, allowing for its wider color gamut to be displayed in much wider detail. You'll find a much appreciated HDR brightness slider in the settings, and if you want to get a real picture of the difference between the standard and the high dynamic range, you can split the screen and see them both side by side while playing the game. Although it's a slightly older release, the Coalition has done a great job to turn Gears of War 4 into a poster child for what Xbox One X is capable of, incorporating all the new technologies supported by the Xbox One X into one game. So that's all for now. That makes our top 10 games that will play even more beautifully on your brand new Xbox One X. Hoping you had an excellent time here. We would like to thank a million times to our dearest subscriber family for your never-ending love and support. And until next time, stay tuned for even more.